Hey everybody, welcome once again to the Road to the Procure Tech Cup. This is episode 7, and this is the show that's all about showing you the art of the possible with procurement technology. So really glad to have you here today. We've got an action-packed show once again for this next half hour here. We've got Graphite on the show to help us discover and discuss how to build business cases for supplier relationship management tools. So very happy to have them on. But before we get to the content, just a bit of housekeeping here as usual. So we've been going since the end of September here, showing you how to be successful with Procure Tech. Graphite SRM solution is on the show this week, and next week we've got Pactum coming on to discuss how we should be thinking about niche solutions, right? That may be within a sub process of procurement, or just one little piece like contract renewals, right? Things like that. They're an autonomous and negotiation solution, or automated negotiation solution at the Corp. They do a lot more things as well, which we'll get into next week. But just wanted to highlight that as we head here to our holiday break. And don't forget that in April 2026, we're going to have a virtual conference to have all these folks demo their solutions, talk about how to be successful. So if you're looking to learn, that's going to be the place to be in April. Agenda for today, real quick. So what is an SRM tool? I talked about supplier relationship management tools. We'll define that together with our guests. They, as a solution category champ for that solution category, will outline who they are as Graphite, what they do, and how you should think about them, and whether they're qualified to be having the discussion, right? And so then we'll get into the meat of the content around how to build business cases. Essentially, the three levers we'll discuss is operational efficiency, risk reduction, and then tying it into wider corporate initiative to wrap things up, right? So without further ado, let's bring in our two guests here. We've got Callie, head of marketing at Graphite, and Conrad, CEO. So thanks a lot for being here, guys. How are you doing?
Doing great.
That's awesome. We're doing awesome. What is it today? Friday after a busy week, on our way to Thanksgiving and Christmas.
Yep, I can't believe it. Like, it's snow in Montreal this week, so it's early versus usual. So I'm feeling the end of the year rush.
We got the opposite of that here in Utah. It's 60 degrees. I went for a run this morning. It feels like middle of September, not middle of November.
Bring that energy to the call, then, right? I'd love to get your perspective as well on what's an SRM tool. I bring this market map up every week. For me, it's really that bottom layer, right, around managing the supplier relationship through onboarding, classifying, qualifying them for different work in different commodities or different geographies, managing their data, whether it be transactional data, bank account data, looking at risk, looking at performance, and then inevitably, when the relationship ends, offboarding them. So that's what the little blue circle around intake management, which is something that you guys do as part of SRM. So I'd love your take on, is that how you define it, and why you've brought us intake into that picture?
It's funny, when we started Graphite, we used the word holistic supplier manager. Tech company had used SRM for a specific kind of niche of stuff, and it kind of confused the issue a little bit. But if you think about what you're showing there, that is holistic, right? And I think people think part of holistic supplier management is managing the relationship, which is 100% right on the money. So this bundle that you've put together, absolutely, that's holistic supplier management, supplier relationship management, end-to-end. We bundled in intake because our suppliers have a preferred supplier list. How do we present that information about the suppliers back out to our stakeholders, like through a front door? So what this really is an ideal front door to all that supplier data and information back out to the rest of the organization. I always say the best supplier onboarding is no onboarding at all. Just use one of our IDs. That's very difficult. Visibility back into Ariba, Coupa, all these tools is hard. So that's really just early visibility into who the suppliers are, what they do, and how to get engaged.
I think the other thing I would add to Joel is how different SRM can look in different organizations based off of what the challenges and pain points are in your industry, how procurement is even perceived or seen in the business itself, right? To keep things moving, or are you seen as a strategic partner? You know, what are the disciplines that you're taking on in your organization? And in some industries, we see a lot of folks really, if you're in a very heavy direct materials business, supplier risk management becomes extremely important to you. But what that looks like for you can look very, it really depends. SRM is about the maturity of your business, and there's a lot of businesses ready to take that next step.
Yeah, and I think that illustrates the further point around why it's at the bottom of the slide. To me, it's the foundation, right? Like, you can't do all the rest of the classic P and AP if you don't have that great foundation. And I think we'll get into that a little bit more through the conversation here. But that's where your intervention brings me for sure. All right, so now that we've defined terms here, Conrad, I'd love for you to walk us through, right, how you guys think about the problem. We've started touching on it, but in the context of Graphite, what do you guys do? Who do you serve? Who's your ICP? We'd love to learn more.
Yeah, so let me tell you just a little bit about this 19, 20 years old. I met with a strategy consultant, and he gave me this strategy tool that just kind of goes back to the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And he was like, you've got to understand what your customer's hierarchy of needs are. Like, us as procurement people, who are our internal stakeholders, our customers, what in this pyramid of holistic supplier management, supplier relationship management, right? So you, on your previous slide, showed this horizontal bar, which is great. As you go into there, you see that they actually start building on each other as well. Just like supplier management is the core of your overall procurement process and capability, the supplier management maturity model, or something, if you want to think about it that way, really builds one step on the other, right? So if you think, what do the customers really care most about from procurement, you've got to be able to buy and pay. Like, that's it. Like, just if you think about a small organization, I went from Intel to a really small organization, and it was so different because at Intel there was 45 teams doing everything from category management that was just doing negotiations. Like, when you're ready to negotiate, you bring in the big guns to do the negotiation. Was wild and very cool. Great place to learn and grow. I get to this other company where I'm the only person, and frankly, everybody that's a startup, and everybody's goal is just do your job, clean up stay out of the way and clean up the mess. Don't slow me down. Get the basics done. So that really is where you talk about the transactions. Once you can do the transactions well, you can start talking about getting up the value chain. Okay, well, now you can help us with our RFP. Now you can help us manage the supplier. Just like marching right up that value chain. But ultimately, just like everything else, if your data is bad, that is the center of how you keep track of your contracts. It's the center of how you keep track of your transactions. It's your spend. Like, everything that you're kind of doing on a day-to-day basis comes back to the foundation of this supplier management hierarchy.
Yeah, and like the example that jumps to mind, like, if I'm just trying to get you to buy and pay as fast as possible, like, I might be creating duplicate supply records just to get somebody paid, get the transaction out of the way, but then I've got 12 suppliers that are all the same, essentially. And so if I'm trying to do a category analysis or negotiation plan, like, I've been in situations where we ask the supplier what our spend is, because we can't figure it out ourselves. So
that gets so embarrassing. What a great way to go into the negotiation, right? Or, hey, can you send me the contract? Like, so much of this kind of stitches back to those bits and pieces and the data. So, when we started looking at this problem, I was the head of procurement over at Adobe, and we started looking at, I was meeting with the other, CPOs in the Bay Area, and we started to say, how can we actually do supplier management better? Because CPOs and procurement leaders and teams every month. And what I see is that we're all sort of stuck on the bottom of that pyramid. Everybody has aspirations to go up the pyramid to these higher value opportunities, but everyone is kind of stuck there. And that's because that transactional stuff, the data collection, the risk management, but this has grown tremendously in my career over the past 30 years. On the indirect side, it used to be like a 2% nit that you would do on the side, and now it's more like a 20 to 40% like giant boulder in the middle of everything that we're doing. So the answer is pretty easy. I mean, that was when we were just kind of coming out of the early visibility to social networks, right? LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, these were like the big talk of the town everywhere. It's like, well, why aren't we doing supplier management like that? Like a big part of supplier management is the information. And on the social side, we're getting bombarded with information. Like, I know where you went to dinner last night and where you're going on vacation with your family and like what this is, right? You want to update your bank account and now you have to track down 10,000 customers and get it into all of their ERPs, into all of those fields, which is no small feat. So we said, hey, let's create this like a social network. In this case, on the diagram, what you see here, Asana is a supplier in our network, and they're connected. You can see a sampling of our customers that they're connected to. When they make a change to their profile, just like, you know, when you change your job, everybody in the network is automatically notified out of your responsibility, and it puts it right where it needs to go, which is the person that really knows the data. My address is this because I'm going to work here, and I'm not going to go scrape it off of some, you know, database somewhere and realize it's like four moves ago.
This concept, I've heard of it as well from like other sources of pay suites, but I know you tackle it a bit differently. Like, and maybe the question I could ask to illustrate this is like, can suppliers send or share their data with folks that aren't on Graphite, right? Is this an open network, or do I need to wait to get onboarded by a buyer of this solution?
That's a perfect question. And you know, if you had been in those early day meetings with us with the whiteboard, those are exactly the kind of questions we were asking. Like, how should this work? There's two parts to your question there. Once you have a profile in Graphite, you just click and share it. Just like if you want to share your LinkedIn profile, you want to share your whatever latest social stuff, what you had for dinner last night. There's bank data, there's data flows, there's security documents. There's a bunch of stuff that you just don't want flying around. So you get to pick which data elements and documents you want to share as you send it out to additional customers that may not be on Graphite yet. So this gives, what's really cool is it gives the suppliers probably for the first time a great place for them to manage this hodgepodge of information. A lot of times they'll have like a Google folder that has all the documents that they need to give, you know, to it all. The certificates of insurance, the diversity, the banking, it's all right there. It's ready to share. Now, you know, right now, access to Graphite as a supplier is sort of an invitation process by trusted customers. We have a proprietary process and technology to make sure you are who you say you are, so that when you show up something like that and try and intercept your way into those payment processes. But we don't want to tempt people to be showing up and, you know, like if you go into LinkedIn today, there are so many profiles that are not, you know, not legit, and the Graphite profiles are legit. They have to be, because this data is ready to pay.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest challenge, right? Which kind of leads into this concept that you've outlined.
Yeah. So this profile, if you think about your LinkedIn profile to school, some experience and skills, and then for some people, you know, a whole bunch about weekend vacations and everything else. I try and keep that stuff out of there, but it's turning into an interesting mix. In Graphite, the core of your profile is the commercial data, because at any size of organization that you are, you could be the smallest organization, just started up last week. You need to provide that commercial data to your customers. And then as you mature and as your customers' requests grow, what starts layering around that are additional information and data sets. So risk data and documents. Maybe it's a SOC 2. Maybe it's, additional insurance certificate information, things like that, right? So in this core, there's data that's managed by the vendor. Today, Joel, at most organizations, you could go in and say, well, I'm going to go into the SAP and I'm going to change the address for IBM. You just go in there and change the address. Yeah. It's not really, and that's a perfect explanation of why you're acting like it's your data. It's not your data, it's their data. And so that's this yellow semicircle. They manage their data responsible for. They don't get to pick their payment methods and their payment terms and, their company codes that they're approved for, all of that other kind of stuff that goes into the ERP. So that's the blue semicircle. And then, of course, as you look at this now, you have this really cool holistic profile set of information about who this vendor is. And we layer in all of these third-party data sources that you also use, in this trust but verify sort of mindset. You want to see what Rapid Ratings or Dow Jones or Dun & Bradstreet or anybody else has to say about the supplier, it can be just right there front and center in the middle of the profile.
And I feel like that's kind of it illustrates beautifully how hard a problem this is to solve, and why I think looking at these pure play solutions or best of breed solutions is worthwhile, because if you're looking at a company that's trying to solve this problem, very, very hard problem, on top of doing everything else, like it dilutes the effort, so to speak, right?
Yeah. Well, and we talk to organizations all the time. I mean, I won't give you names, but every day, just this morning and yesterday, I was talking to an organization's ERP. This idea of cleaning up the vendor data, cleaning up the information that's going to go into your brand spanking clean ERP. I mean, those are mega $10 million kinds of investments, right? Like, people are spending so much money to imagine. Sorry, my mind's wandering. Imagine building this incredible house, your dream house, and then you drag your dusty old sofa in from your college dorm. Like, you don't want to do that. Like, you've got to think about having the data up and ready to go. And this is that we're seeing out there in across companies as well.
And I would also add, Joel, that we work a lot with Gartner, and one of the data points that they talk about all the time is they predict by 2027, 85% of procurement teams won't see the full value of their AI projects and their AI implementations because of bad quality data. Mm-hmm. Like, that alone, it's almost thinking about supplier data. Supplier data cleanup becomes a lot more important when you're putting AI on top of it. Because if the agent is only operating off of data points, doesn't have all of the knowledge within a procurement team member's brain to operate off of, and your data is bad, it's going to make mistakes addictive or as valuable. So we're actually seeing a lot of companies coming in saying, we know that we're not ready to implement AI projects. If we do right now, they're going to fail in procurement. And so this is like your insurance policy on all of those AI products as well.
So
and that probably leads us really quickly into the discussion, because I see Simon flying here. I could have taken your analogy, like building your mansion on pallets instead of a foundation. If you want a demo of this product, right, we don't have time on the show this year given the new format, but you can scan this QR code, and I believe the team will get right back to you to schedule something and show you the product in action. But I did want us to get to the meat of the discussion, right, which is like, how should we think about building a business case? And I think how we ended that discussion, that segment right there, leads beautifully into it, right? For an SRM tool, if it's the foundation, how should people be thinking about building the business case for it?
So the real challenge here, I think, as procurement folks, we've been involved in doing all sorts of, call it cost savings analysis, right? I mean, all of us have done that. Hey, you got to put a contract, you got to put all this cost savings stuff together. So there's been a lot of corporate pressure on us to kind of squish that down to a small number, which is totally cool. I think we should be very conservative in those reports so we have credibility. And I think that's kind of programmed us when we look at a project like this to go, well, what are the direct savings right here? And it comes down to really transactional efficiency sorts of things. What headcount is saved in our organization? And there's real headcount that can be saved. So these are really interesting and helpful things to add into into your ROI model, but you've got to think about other things as well that are more strategic to the organization. So I would encourage you, and frankly, we would love to sit down with you and help you through this process. Luke, who's not with us on the call today, Callie, myself, and others, we do this all the time. So as you're trying to put together an ROI and say, hey, what's the value here? How can we justify it? Let's have a conversation with you. And trust me, this isn't, early in my career, I had tech companies show up with like $20, $30 million ARR kind of statements that didn't hold water. This isn't how we work. So we'll just kind of sit down with you. We'll look at all the possibilities. We'll put some math and numbers and spreadsheets behind it to help you build that out. And at the end of the day, that's a spreadsheet you own. It's a tool you own that you can kind of carry through, update the assumptions to be something that you really believe and stand behind. But I would say there's obviously the operational efficiency elements, because supplier management has evolved on the indirect side to be very risk oriented now. This is the big boulder in the middle of supplier management that's new, I would say, in the last 15 years at the scope that it is. It's really important to understand these things. I mean, we often run across organizations that have either nearly paid a big fraudulent payment to a supplier or actually did. There's real data there. And if you haven't had one of those near misses, then I would say from a risk perspective, that turns into, thank God this hasn't happened, but what is typical and what do those typical cases look like? And how do we bring those back in? Not in sort of a scary fear way, but there's a real way to sort of look at those numbers, make some estimations against it, and carry a quantifiable number into the ROI. Yeah. And then most importantly, I would say, is understand the strategy and priority for the organization, from a large perspective. You'll be surprised how many things we do in procurement with our suppliers that makes a material difference to what's going on in the organization. You can, we were talking to a large oil and energy company the other day. And when you think about the amount of time it takes to go through processes to get oil out of the ground into the refinery and out to the customers, a few weeks or a few months, there's real, as soon as the oil starts flowing, this is millions of dollars of differences in making this like a 10-day process versus a 100-day process. Understanding what the organization is trying to accomplish and starting to connect what you're doing back to those corporate initiatives and priorities is really a big deal.
And when you were talking about risk, I find it's become top of mind as well with what we lived through with COVID-19 and what we're living now with more global uncertainty around trade. And so I feel like that's more top of mind now in organizations in general. And one trick, I don't know if you'd agree with this, but one trick that I've seen is people will wait to have a bad audit report to use that as a driver to justify one of these projects. And I'm going why are you waiting, right? Go see internal audit now, bring them on your side, right? And
you're not wrong. You're not wrong, Joel. We get a lot of people coming in saying, hey, we just had a multi-million-dollar vendor fraud incident. We've known this has been a problem for years and we need to fix it now, right? Because we can't let it happen again. Unfortunately, in fraud and risk situations, that tends to be the case. But we do see a lot of organizations thinking, a lot of the times it's when a new leader comes in and says, hey, this is a problem that needs to be fixed right now, right? And often I think one of the big things that I will call out in a minute too is that it takes a team to pull this together, right? Yeah. Procurement isn't the only part of the organization that cares about risk from a fraud perspective or from a compliance perspective. So you got to kind of put together what we call your pit crew.
Yeah, and maybe we can head there by way of a case study here. Which I think you guys wanted to highlight as well.
Yeah, Callie, you want to run through this one, Callie?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think about it this way. DigiCert Steve is actually he's that strategic leader, right? Who's thinking ahead. And so during the Silicon Valley Bank crisis, DigiCert had a ton of suppliers and vendors who were banking through SVB. They needed to change their bank accounts. They were moving funds to new accounts, and they needed to make sure that those payments that were supposed to go to them from DigiCert were going to the right account. Steve is great, and he said, essentially having Graphite in place, his CFO said, this was a perfect opportunity for us to lose a lot of money with vendor fraud. This is a fraudster's dream scenario. Every vendor's changing bank accounts. It's a great time for me to just kind of sneak in there. And he said, no, we have a process in place for this. It was easy for the vendors to use. The CFO said, like, that alone that saved us from losing time in operations, from having to have teams who are highly skilled and highly paid just calling vendors and doing manual checks and validations on it, right? So when you think about that proactivity, when it's there and you need it, then that value is just reasserted again. I like that Paramount is a great example. They also, the amount of time that your team spends on supplier support and helping suppliers navigate a process. I like to think about, we spoke with a potential customer who they said something really interesting. We need to onboard a 16-year-old influencer who doesn't know what a routing number is. And we also need to onboard like Google, right? And so what you do for that 16-year-old influencer and getting them onboarded, obviously extremely different than what you are going to require out of like, Google services. So, the maturity of the supplier as well is very different there, right? And so the 16-year-old influencer probably needs some hand holding through that process. They might not know it, not to besmirch any 16-year-olds, but Paramount, when they implemented us, they saw a 98% reduction in support issues. We actually spoke with someone at DPW, Conrad and myself, earlier this year, who they have 2 million supplier support tickets outstanding right now.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, when you think about that and the amount of effort it takes to automate and streamline that, if you can create a platform that's really intuitive for the supplier that limits the support issues, that frees up a massive amount of time. It is not insignificant.
No.
The second, health equity, I think is really interesting too, because, health equity is a managed services account provider. So they do HSA, FSA cards, right? And so they deal with HIPAA data, they deal with PII, they deal with credit card and payment processing data that's really highly regulated, and they have vendors that are doing a lot of the lift. So when they're doing their onboarding time, there's obviously a pretty extensive risk assessment period. They came to us, they were at 90 days average onboarding. Last year, they were at 12. Now they're under 7. And so the continued efficiency of the network, how they're achieving, like what changed getting them from 12 to 7? Their process didn't change a lot internally, but they were onboarding more suppliers from Graphite through our growth that were network suppliers. So it was network suppliers at Graphite onboard in 1 to 3 days because the data is already there. It's really the internal process on the buyer side that is slower, honestly. And then lastly, Casey's is they're a convenience store chain in the US. They had a full team managing supplier data, just doing cleanup. They have a ton of suppliers, as you might imagine a convenience store does. And they estimate they saved 105 hours a week across their team. And they repurposed those folks into roles that would help them do more strategic procurement. So it was a cost savings, but it was also just an efficiency gain, and then an ability to repurpose those folks into roles and responsibilities that actually that changed how procurement was viewed in the business from ticket taking and payment processing into a strategic partner, which is also a huge leap and a jump in your maturity.
Yeah, and it circles back to what we were saying at the front end of like going up that
Yes.
pyramid, right? And then also, if you get an efficiency lever in your business case, how are you redeploying that? And there's probably a ton of value there that you can also include in that business case.
Absolutely.
And I love Callie that she walked through those situations, because that is the opportunity cost of not doing that kind of streamlining on the bottom of the pyramid is the other things that are super high value levers in your business. A quick point, right? We spend so much time worrying about like the tactical stuff in the business. Imagine you can save 5% of the new suppliers coming in or something. Your existing, like your preferred suppliers, the 20% that are the 80% of the spend, if you can get a 1% out of those guys in terms of efficiency and value and innovation, it's massive. So when you think about where you really want your procurement team focused, it's on those really high value, very integrated preferred suppliers in the business. So getting away from the administration, getting into the strategic supplier management, value, risk reduction, innovation, design, massive. That's when you really get to the mega $1 million of value opportunity, because the value just climbs as you get up the pyramid. I know, Joel, I know we're running out of time. Let me just hit something really key here on this last slide, which is there has never been a time that I've seen in 30 years when the C-suite is as concerned about procurement as they are today. Part of it, of course, was COVID. It kind of raised the bar. But I can tell you, businesses everywhere, the stakeholders are complaining to their leaders, and that's going up the chain all the way to the C-suite. Like, what is wrong with procurement? And it comes down to this bottom of the pyramid. It has changed over the last 10 or 15 years, and procurement hasn't changed with it. The technology, the processes, and everything else. So I say that because you have a whole army of advocates for you in the organization, in these leaders that are concerned and frustrated with how procurement's working. You can be afraid of them and go like, oh my gosh, I'm disappointing them. Or you can enlist them in your business case. They should be your biggest advocates to go side by side with you into the leadership and say, look, we have to make an investment in procurement to get the automation that we need so that we can stop slowing down the business. It is a team effort at this point, and pulling the team together and doing it, as Callie said, like with the pit crew, it's a difference maker.
Yeah, and one thing I'll just call out on
Callie, I just wanted to I know we're running over time. If we go a few minutes, it's fine, right? I just wanted to highlight this comment in the chat, right?
Oh, I love it.
Thanks for articulating what so many overlook. In large organizations, the 80-20% rule often masks deeper risks, et cetera. But I think, I just wanted to call that out because I do think this is a valuable discussion, right? But Callie, you were going to add. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I think the biggest, we like to think positively about the business case, but where we most often see business cases fail is when procurement comes in saying, this is my rodeo, right? My circus, my monkeys. And this is the efficiency and the tactical of what I'm going to do to reduce my budget this year. And they're not thinking about, how is IT going to be impacted? How am I going to implement this? What kind of savings can I impact? If you have like a center of excellence or a shared services, this is a perfect project. They're going to love working and partnering with you on this, because supplier onboarding and supplier management in your organization today, if you don't have an SRM tool, it is done by not just procurement. It is done by every department, right? Every department is collecting invoices and putting suppliers and vendors into a process. Now, in some organizations, I have to out myself as the marketer, right? I'm the one spending a lot of money, so I'm the one that's tending to do all of that. And once you understand the internal pain really well, I've seen business cases win and lose based off of just internal quotes from a highly paid head of research who's saying that they, these are people who make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and they're stuck doing paper pushing for clinical research trials for preferred suppliers, right? They don't like that process. And it's much better for procurement to lead that process, or to have a tool intuitive enough that suppliers get it 95% of the way there, and then procurement can take it across to the finish line, right? So when you think about the tactical and strategic, don't just be myopic and think about, how is this going to affect my sphere of influence here? Engage your pit crew for finance and legal and IT. Get them on board. These are shared problems across the organization.
Yeah, and I'd add internal audit there as well, right? I think Callie might have frozen here. Hope it's not me. But as we wrap up the show here, right? Recapping, there's supplier portals and networks that are changing, right? So adoption of closed networks is really tough, because you're not leveraging the network effect with which I know Graphite is doing. How can you decrease friction for your suppliers? So as you think about supplier onboarding, like if you're having to do everything manually, they're also having to do everything manually, and it increases friction if they have to reset accounts, etc. What does your company care about, right? So Callie just touched on that, right? Yes, operational efficiency and risk, but going wider to that, which is the third point, right? How do we do the next level in business cases? How do we tie supplier data into wider business objectives? And I think I lost the the Graphite crew, unfortunately. Oh, here we go. Callie's back. Conrad, I don't know, maybe we guys had
our internet reset, so we're hopping back in. Sorry about that.
Well, we're just recapping the show, so it's all good, right? And I think, just to wrap up, and it's a perfect timing for you guys to be back, which is, thank you for coming on the show, first of all, and second, and coming on the show twice in the same episode. That's really something that nobody's done before. And
We're setting records.
Yeah, that's right. If you guys want to, who are watching, want to follow along, we talked about SRM architecture last week. We're talking about niche source to pay tools next week and how to build business cases for those. So you can follow along with the Procurement newsletter with that teal QR code on the left. And then, Conrad, I know you guys wanted also to invite folks to get in touch, if they want to take this conversation further.
Yeah, we'd love to help you put your business case together. There's no reason to start a spreadsheet and a business case from scratch. We do this every day. We're really good at it.
Yeah, and I love that you highlighted the fact, which I think scares a lot of people, is like, you're not just going to get a number, you're going to get like the structure, the framework, right? Build it out together. Because you have to trust what's in that business case at the end of the day for it to be.
Well, and some of those line items won't be relevant in your business, but we've seen them all, so we can really help save you a bunch of time and make sure you're taking something to the CFO that he or she can get excited about.
Yeah, very cool. All right, so thank you, Callie, Conrad, for coming in. I hope your hearts didn't jump out of your chest as you logged off there. Thanks for coming back. And for everybody who's watching online, thanks so much for being here, for taking the extra time as well. And we'll see you again next week. Thanks so much.
See you later. Thanks, Joel.
Thanks, Joel.